Let me give you a list of names and then you tell me which one of them gets you excited. Rishi Sunak, Ben Wallace, Penny Mordaunt, Liz Truss, Tom Tugendhat, Sajid Javid, Jeremy Hunt, Nadine Zahawi, Suella Braverman, Steve Baker. I don't think any of them particularly get the juices going, do they? I don't think any of them would actually generate much interest anywhere outside of Downing Street, outside of the Houses of Commons, outside of Parliament. We are here to break through the ruins of the Tory party this morning, ladies and gentlemen, because that's what I think it has become, a ruined party. Boris Johnson is gone. I don't think anybody would argue with the fact that it was probably time for him to go, and it's probably still time for him to go, even though he's not actually gone. Richard Tice is here. Now, there's a name that conjures up a lot of excitement, and we'll be talking to him about all of this, because what is going on? Who is running the country? What actually happens if something terrible goes on in Ukraine? What actually happens if we don't have a leader of the country who's constantly in charge? What happens? 0344 499 1000. We've got loads of people to talk to, including Christopher Snowdon, including William Clouston from the SDP, including James Sunderland MP as well. Lots more to do. Let's start off, though, first with Richard Tice. Richard, a very good morning to you.
Hey, very good morning. It's bright and sunny outside, but I suspect it's not feeling that bright and sunny in the Conservative Party.
I don't think it is. I think they've kiboshed themselves, haven't they? I mean, it seems to me, the more I think about what they've done, the more it seems that they're ruined.
Look, but the reality is, Mike, they had no choice. It had just gone from scandal to untruth to untruth. And tragically for Boris Johnson, he had such an opportunity, but the reality, he was the architect and the master of his own downfall. And I think, now we are in a situation where actually, really and truly, as you say, we need some leadership rapidly. We've got to look forwards, not backwards. My concern is that they're going to take way too long about this whole process. Right. And they're already demonstrating how out of touch they are as a cabinet, as a government. For example, the 1922 committee isn't meeting till next week to set the timetable and the rules. Right. They should have met yesterday, right? They should have agreed the timetable yesterday and fired
Yeah. What's all this kind of, relaxation about, let's have the weekend off, let's maybe have a recess.
Utterly absurd, because there's a cost of living crisis going on. There's obviously the ongoing war in Ukraine. We've got energy shortages, risks of energy rationing this later this year. Yeah. So they need to make some rapid decisions now. And the only thing they decided yesterday was they wouldn't make any decisions.
Right. And
as a cabinet.
Let's look at some of the things that are coming up. We've got some more rail strikes coming up. ASLEF are threatening to strike, as are the RMT, saying they're going to go all the way through to Christmas. We've got James Cleverly, who's been this morning doing the rounds, talking about whether he's not sure about giving the teachers a 5% pay increase, which apparently was already suggested by Nadine Zahawi, who's now the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who also won't say whether it's going to happen. We've got the problems with the airports. We've got the problems with the European Union. We've got have we got a Secretary of State for Northern Ireland? I'm not even sure.
It's hard to know, but I just feel that they'll be in a sort of state of paralysis, and what should be happening is the 22, and I know there are representations being made to the senior people in the 1922 committee. They've got to meet over the weekend, set the timetable, make it really short. It needs to be 4 to 5 weeks, so that we know what the timetable is. And in my view, actually, Dominic Raab should be appointed the caretaker Prime Minister, because he's clarified that he won't be a candidate for the leadership. And therefore, he could have actually, if he'd done that, for example, they could have basically gone back to where they were on Tuesday with the same cabinet. People know what they're doing. The issue with lots of new ministers coming into places, they don't know their brief.
No.
They don't know what the policies are.
And they're also bringing in lots of people with them who also don't know the brief.
For the sake of a few weeks. So it's the worst of all worlds that they've sort of taken themselves into, and I think, as you say, they've got themselves into a real incompetent pickle. I think it was the right decision that Boris Johnson had to go because of his own failings. Yeah. But I think it's pretty obvious what should happen, and still could happen, that actually he should basically hand over the reins to Dominic Raab urgently, rapidly, and then Dominic Raab can lead the cabinet over the next few weeks whilst they get on and elect a new leader.
But you know what's becoming more and more clear to me, and you'll enjoy this. I should have pressed him more in March of last year, because actually he'd gone in March of last year when I was calling for him to go in March of last year. This could have all been very different.
It could have been completely different. You saw it, essentially earlier than almost anybody.
Yeah.
And as I said before, and you then sort of had a slight uncharacteristic doubt in your mind, Mr. Graham.
You keep saying this. No, it was the reason that I didn't have doubt in my mind. I knew that he wasn't conservative enough, and I kept saying that, but it turned into sort of, this is not the right time kind of conversation. But actually, this is not the right time either.
There's never a good time.
No.
But if it gets as bad that you can't trust the words coming out of a leader's mouth, then you're into a really bad place.
Yeah.
And sadly, that's where we've got to. And many listeners and viewers are big Boris fans, and look, we understand that, but it is really serious when you can't trust what your leader says.
No, I think most
if a leader
people
says, if he says one thing and actually it's patently clear that something else has happened, if he says he's cutting taxes when actually he's raising taxes higher than ever, then all of it, just confidence just evaporates, and essentially that's what happened.
Absolutely right, and I think the problem for most people now is they accept, even those die-hard Boris fans, that he probably should have gone and he had to go because of the way things had turned out and the fact that he couldn't really any longer form a cabinet. But let's not forget, I mean, all those names I read out at the top of the show, they were all part of this government, more or less.
Most of them.
Apart from Steve Baker, with one or two, and Tom
Tugendhat. Most of them were. But they knew the writing was on the wall for a long time, and they were pretty spineless, and they let it go on, and essentially, sadly, get worse and worse until eventually Sunak and Sajid belatedly said enough's enough on Tuesday.
Right.
But actually, the truth is, many of those names that you read out, look, they would be competent, possibly more competent than actually running a government, running a country, than Boris Johnson. But the key question I think you're alluding to is, are they capable of winning an election, given that actually almost nobody outside, frankly, the M25 or even Westminster would recognise any of them in the street, if they walk down the street.
And also, are they brave enough to make the big decisions, which are not just about managing something, but actually about leading, as you said before, and making this country, a forward-thinking economy, a modern economy, a low-tax economy.
But the truth is, the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, wasn't brave enough to make those decisions. He wouldn't cut taxes. He wouldn't make it a low-tax economy. He wouldn't make us self-reliant on energy by using shale gas and North Sea gas that could drive down energy prices. Instead, he went completely the opposite direction. Right. He wanted more expensive energy with offshore windmills.
But there also isn't any one of those names that would do anything different in terms of net zero. They're all
there absolutely are, actually.
Well, tell me who, and then we can tell people who to vote for.
He won't win it, but for example, Steve Baker is on net zero watch. He absolutely is on the same page as people like me on net zero. Look, we all want to reduce emissions, but you want to do your own, do your our bit.
I don't actually want to reduce emissions, but that's just me.
Well, I mean, because
I just don't want to. I don't like doing what I'm told.
No, but I think we all want to do our bit generally in life. And I think as a nation we want to do our bit, but we want to do the right bit at the right price.
Yeah.
Not the stupid bit, which was Boris's net zero, which I call net stupid, because it was the wrong bit at the right price. I mean, that would impoverish the nation.
I liken it to, you keeping your garden tidy in the front of the house. Next door you've got some maniac who just doesn't care, and it's all overgrown, and there's a couple of cars sitting there.
Yes.
So whatever you do, your street still looks ridiculously bad, and that's where we are.
But with regard to net zero, that's why you can show the way. You can use technology, do your bit, but it's got to be proportionate to, for example, our position in the world. If we're 1% of global emissions, there's no point completely sort of impoverishing ourselves, sending all our jobs and money overseas, so that we can look at the carnage left behind and says, well, at least we're not, producing any net gross emissions.
Yes, and then not making enough fuel for our own consumption, so that we have to buy it all in a very expensive way from overseas.
And you say, you inferred that Boris is a brave leader, but actually he didn't have the courage to tell the Chancellor. He didn't have the courage to tell the Chancellor, cut fuel duty. People are suffering daily.
No, I'm not saying Boris was a brave leader. What I am saying is what we need now is a brave leader.
Yes.
We need somebody who will take those decisions, and I don't see any of these people, perhaps apart from, as you say, Steve Baker, making that decision.
I think there are people like Tom Tugendhat who would be brave enough.
But he's not going to get in, is he?
It's unlikely. What is clear to me is the likes of Rishi Sunak, who's been at the heart of it. He absolutely is not brave enough. I don't know what's happened to him, but as a supposed smart financier from the city. He doesn't seem to understand the strength of the nation's balance sheet. He doesn't seem to understand the pain that people are suffering, and he doesn't seem to understand that actually if you cut taxes hard, you will get higher growth, and that'll create higher wages and higher tax revenues in the medium term. This is basic economics. And I just do not understand why some of these people at the heart of government have completely failed to recognise that and to deliver on it.
And I mean, Rishi Sunak is liked because of the money he gave away on furlough to a lot of people, but he missed a lot of people out. He refused to help those people who begged him to help them.
Correct.
And apart from the furlough, which he was more or less ordered to do anyway, I don't think there's anything that he did as Chancellor that makes him in any way laudable.
It's worse than that. All he did was put taxes up. Look, anybody can give away someone else's money, and that's what he did.
Right.
And he gave it away for too long, and the net result is he actually increased a sense of dependency.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it now with the extra 1.5 million people on out-of-work benefits than pre-COVID.
Yes.
And, some of those people will be unwell and genuinely unable to work. Sadly, there are many of those people who've been trapped in the benefit system where it doesn't pay them to work. And this is a serious national issue.
And let's not forget that also this is a government that has fostered and allowed this working from home cobblers, where, half the civil service doesn't bother coming to work. Some of them have even moved out of the city so they can have a nice life in the country. And all this kind of, I quite like a nice work-life balance. Well, great. I mean, that's not for me to accept as a policy. Work-life balance is not what the Tories should be doing. You should be working, you should be paying your taxes, and you should be keeping more of the money that you make, and you should be spending it in the high street. Simple.
And it requires correct, and it requires courageous leadership to tell them get back to the office. You can have a hybrid situation, but the idea of sort of almost permanent working,
it's ruined the economy. It's ruined the country.
As it's going, it's going the wrong way because they've been far too generous in allowing it to carry on. As I've said before, there are times when actually sitting in a quiet room at home with a cold towel over your head, writing a boring report or reading a boring report might be the right thing to do. But otherwise, most of the time, we human beings, we're much better off being creative and imaginative and enthusiastic when we're interacting with other great people in and around the office or the shop or the factory floor, coming up with interesting new ideas.
And that is your duty as an individual and as a human being, it seems to me. If you want to live on your own, and like some kind of hermit, get lost and go and live in the Himalayas or something. Getting a few people saying that you've lost the plot, Richard, saying that you want people to work from home and you want to reduce your emissions. What's going on? For heaven's sake, it's the Reform UK party here. I think he doesn't speak necessarily for the party policy on that, but he's just trying to be a nice guy. I mean, don't give him a hard time.
Well, I think everybody wants to do their bit and reduce emissions, of course.
Well, that's not what they're saying. They say they don't. Well, they're with me.
I think actually we all care about the environment in our own way.
Yeah.
But the point is, you've got to do it in a way which is sensible, which is affordable, which doesn't impoverish us. And I think actually we all like new technology that works for us. That's fantastic. Invest in that, but don't impoverish the nation and send our jobs and money overseas.
But when it gets to be 30 degrees next week or in a couple of days' time,
of course you put the air conditioning on.
You're going to go out and put the air conditioning on, which is going to send Freon up into the atmosphere and cause some.
But
kind
equally,
of carbon
technology can make air conditioning units ever more efficient, for example, so you send a bit fewer emissions into the air. That's the point about gradually doing one's bit.
Yeah.
Using technology rather than completely cutting our nose off to spite our face and saying we can't use any fossil fuel cars.
Yes.
I think we should be investing, for example, with fossil fuel cars. We should be saying that actually let's make the fuel ever more efficient. Let's make the engines ever more efficient.
And
so
they
you
are
gradually
actually.
do your. And of course,
I mean, modern engines. I mean, my diesel engine on my car now is probably more efficient than any car that is even in existence.
But the government
an electric car
stupidly going down their foolish net zero route means that the automotive manufacturers have to stop investing in new technology for combustion engines. So, again, you're cutting your nose off to spite your face.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying we can make progress, we can use technology, we can do our bit whilst continuing to grow. Because at the end of the day, let's be clear, fossil fuels have led to cheap, cost-effective energy, which has led to human flourishing.
Well, exactly
That's the
right.
basic,
and we have become civilised and become a modern, industrial complex countries as a result of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And why would you reject it now?
And that's why I think we should be using the treasure under our feet, the shale gas, the £1 trillion worth. We could have £1 trillion worth of levelling up.
Well, here's another question for you. Is there any of those candidates whose names I mentioned who would open up the wells for fracking?
I think the only one that I'm aware of, I could be wrong, it does happen.
It's probably Steve Baker again, right?
Is Steve Baker.
Yeah.
But
Which is
there might
why
be-
I keep saying he's the ideal candidate. He's the only candidate for me that will make any difference.
In terms of what most people might say would be a real conservative, cutting taxes hard and believing in being smart about emissions rather than the stupid net zero that Boris pushed the party down, the only one I'm aware of would be Steve Baker, but I don't think he will get into the last two.
Diana has sent a tweet in about Tom Tugendhat's piece in The Telegraph today, in which he says, I've served before, now I hope to answer the call as Prime Minister. That's a reference to his time in the armed forces, of course. She says he would do nothing about the ludicrous green agenda. He didn't even mention it in his play for party leader. Plus, he's also a Remainer. Is he?
And I think Diana's absolutely right there. As I say, I don't know all of the potential candidates' position on net zero, but I suspect the fact that he didn't mention it shows that he's not in the right place on it. And it's absolutely important because fundamentally the cost of energy drives the cost of everything. And we've got a cost of living crisis. If we had much cheaper energy, like they have in the US because they use their own shale gas, then we wouldn't have this inflation crisis.
But even for them, the price of oil and the price of petrol at the petrol stations has gone through the roof. I mean, they're paying more than they've ever paid. A lot less than us, but they're still not in a good place.
It's gone up, but they started so much lower, and it is still much, much lower. And they can increase their own supply, and they will bring the price down. That's the key point. And I just feel that, in a sense, you've got to cut taxes hard on things like consumer goods, on energy bills, cut VAT, use the Brexit opportunities. And here's the thing, which of these candidates actually will say we need to do Brexit properly?
Yes.
Properly, because we've got a sort of a half Brexit at the moment.
Right.
Because we've left the EU, but they haven't then grasped all the opportunities that we wanted that to give us. You know, we've got the ability to cut taxes, to cut daft, unnecessary EU regulation, but they haven't gone for it.
No.
And
also we've sort of allowed
tragic lost opportunity.
And we've sort of allowed the EU to dictate the terms, haven't we? Because all of the businesses, for example, who now say it's a much more difficult thing to do to trade with the EU now since we've left the European Union. And that's because all the other countries in Europe are starting to impose difficult sort of measures to make it harder for us to trade with them.
Although actually the data is much better than people give it credit for. The Ramonas are saying, oh, it's all woeful. Actually, if you look at the data, our exports in the last couple of months to the EU are higher than they were back in 2018. You know, sometimes it's an inconvenient truth that people don't like.
Yes, but the EU's also not a massive exporting target for us anyway, is it? I mean, that was always the other argument, that people who wanted to leave the EU said, you know, it's such a small portion of our trade anyway, it doesn't really matter.
And declining, and the real growth opportunities are elsewhere in the world, and the real growth opportunities, of course, should be here in the UK. We should be, you know, as I say, investing in technology.
But did you see Michel Barnier's tweet yesterday? I mean, you'd expect
nothing
him
less,
to
wouldn't you?
do exactly what he did. The same guy, by the way, who, when he was running for president of France, decided to be anti-EU.
Yes.
He's now gone back to the other side again. And he said, well, hopefully now that Boris has gone, we can have a better relationship with Britain.
Surprise, surprise.
You know,
I mean, you know,
I don't think so, matey.
I don't think anybody takes too much notice of what anybody in and around the EU says.
But let's just take stock, right? So you want this whole process to go quicker. I'm going to ask you in a minute how we could do that. But, you know, we've still got people arriving in dinghies. We've still got, you know, the fuel prices going through the roof. We've still got strikes looming. We've still got a sort of economy which is in the toilet. We've still got inflation. Now, what's anybody doing about any of this?
But all of those challenges, which are huge, require urgent decisions and leadership. And that's why what they should be doing about it now, they should meet today, the 22 committee, start the firing gun, and have a really tight timetable. You know, they can't take until July the 21st, which is the current suggestion, before you get to the last two, and then you drift off into the holidays and take until mid-September. And don't forget that. You should get down to the last two within about a week from now, get on with it, and then you say to the membership, no, this is happening. You know, we have got technology, you can do all this thing much, much quicker, and then say, right, there's 4 weeks of hustings. They can be online, they can be around. You can have the job done by mid to late August.
We can have one of their hustings here. We had one last time. We had Jeremy Hunt and Boris Johnson up on this very floor, actually, just around the corner.
Right.
So we can do that. You know, give us a shout. We'll sort it out for you tomorrow.
Exactly. That's the point. There's a can-do attitude, but that requires an awareness, being in touch with the gravity of the situation. And at the moment, I'm not sensing a sense of a real understanding of the urgency of the situation. These huge things, as you say, they should be making a decision about fuel duty today and cutting 20, 25p off like they did in Germany.
But in the scheme of things, who makes that decision currently? Because Boris Johnson apparently is only now sitting in as the Prime Minister.
And that's the,
so whose decision is it?
That's the flaw of yesterday, where he said they're not going to make any major policies and bind the hands of his successor. Well, actually, there are certain areas where I think the current Chancellor, which the last time we looked now is Nadhim Zahawi, could say this is urgent as a cabinet. This is my recommendation as the Chancellor. Does everybody agree? Have a collective decision, and then actually the Prime Minister Boris Johnson could then say that's the will of the cabinet. Let's do it, and let's do it today.
Yeah, it's like that movie they made about, I think it was called Dead Water or something like that, where the people are all sort of in the sea and there's a shark circling around them and they're all just treading water, waiting to be eaten. I mean, and then by the end of the film, they all get eaten.
Not very smart, is it?
It's not really, no, because you can't tread water. You know, we are in a crisis of economic madness. We're in a crisis for all sorts of other reasons, and nobody's doing anything. I find it extraordinary.
And that's a really good analogy. You're treading water. I mean, the business secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, he's sitting on a new report from the British Geological Survey about whether or not to go for shale gas.
Yeah, right.
And no one's going to look at that or talk about it for the next month or so. It's urgent.
Absolutely mad. Richard Tice, as ever, great to see you. We haven't really got time to tell people what's coming up on your show on Sunday.
It'll be a full-on show. The Sunday sermon is worth waiting for.
And nothing will have happened by then either, because there's nobody doing anything. For heaven's sake, get back to work, start doing something, start earning your money, you bozos. And I see that as well, they're handing away all of that money they were getting from losing their ministerial post to charity. How about you just don't give it to people? You just keep it, you maniacs.